Welcome, Brian Allred. Thanks so much for being here. You are up in Wisconsin. You're an Altus artist. You teach in the area and also at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to flute to begin with, and also, more specifically, how you got into more the teaching side of things.
Okay. Yeah, you hit my highlights for sure. As far as my beginnings, flute wasn't my first instrument, and I came to it relatively late. My first instrument was violin, and I played that quite seriously forever, and I still play a bit now. But flute came toward the end of middle school. A friend's dad had one just sitting in the closet. And he lent it to me for a bit. It was in terrible shape. It was a Gemeinhardt, I want to say like 3M or something like that. And it was totally leaky. But I was really excited about it, just trying to make any sound out of it. And I got a flute for Christmas. I think it was 7th grade. And then I started playing a little bit more seriously after that, taking lessons and all that. As far as teaching, I also, I started that back when I was in high school, mostly violin lessons then, and mostly to people around my age. Mm-hmm. But then started teaching a little bit of flute, and flute kind of took the priority by the end of high school. So by the time I went to college, I knew that teaching was really what I wanted to do. I thought it was going to be mostly building a private studio. I grew up in Texas, maybe going back to Texas and getting one of those massive 40+ student studios or something like that. It sounded great to me. In my first year of undergrad, I kind of switched focus and knew that I wanted to teach at the collegiate level.
Nice. And how has that gone so far? Obviously, you've got a teaching job and...
Yeah, of course. My first year in this job was particularly strange because I started here at UW-Eau Claire just last year. Okay. So my first year in the middle of a pandemic, while we're trying to navigate a lot of safety concerns, of course, and many other logistical concerns. But I love it. The students are pretty self-motivated. Most of my studio is music education majors, and they are just, generally speaking, so ready to try new things and hone their craft. And there's really nothing better than teaching lessons to motivated students.
It definitely makes it easier.
Yes.
When you feel like you're trying to pull teeth to get them to do something. So that's great that they're all committed and motivated. And I was just talking to someone else about kind of putting not all the responsibility on the teacher for having a good lesson, but a lot of it is on the student coming prepared and eager to learn. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I think for most of my teaching career, I didn't realize that students wouldn't be like I was, that they wouldn't just play because they wanted to. And so I don't know that I've ever quite cracked the code for getting, middle schoolers to get excited about it if they aren't to begin with. Mm-hmm. I imagine there are teachers who are more experienced with that and maybe more successful as far as that goes. But teaching the ones who are just really into it has been really rewarding.
Yeah. So you teach violin and flute. Has the violin sort of informed the way you teach flute a little bit, and vice versa, in the way you teach it?
Yeah, certainly for my flute students, sometimes I might do too much of this, but I will talk about things in terms of how you use the bow. And I've had flute teachers do that who didn't play string instruments, and I still got plenty out of that. But it certainly, I'm kind of obsessed with articulation and nuance in articulation, and I think it's something that violinists think about more than a lot of flutists anyway. So it's nice having something that's also really visual, since we can't see very much of what's going on in our tone production and our articulation. Having a real visual example of what you are trying to produce with your air and your tongue and all of that can be useful, I think. I think that's where I have the most overlap. I think in terms of teaching violin, playing the flute has given me more questions about how we teach string instruments. It's just quite a different process. And especially with some of the methods that are most commonly used for string players, that you don't spend much time outside of really comfortable keys for a long time, which could be said about, beginning band also.
Yeah, we end up in like B flat a lot.
Yeah, and I am very much against that for my flute students, and I don't know that it's necessary to stay really comfortable for quite as long on any of these instruments. So yeah, just it makes me think about why things are taught the way that they are, certainly, because all of these instruments and all of their pedagogy have their baggage. And so it kind of gives me different ways of looking at the issues.
Yeah, I definitely remember for me in college, I was doing like the Franck Sonata, and my teacher was like, this is a beautiful piece on flute, but you really need to go listen to a violinist or a cellist play this because it'll give you a deeper understanding. So it definitely helped me play it because it helps with the phrasing, it helps with everything in that piece to really learn how a stringed instrument would play it, which is originally what it was written for. So yeah, cool. So talking more about teaching, do you have any specific methods that you stick with when you're teaching flute? Any books or any like traditions from prior teachers that you kind of have baked into what you do?
Sure. As with probably anyone, I've taken a lot from all of my teachers and take little bits from each of them. As far as books themselves go, for my college students and some of my private students too, we work out of Walford Kujala's The Flutist Vade Mecum, which I love. It covers anything that you could want to do on the flute, and you could even say that about the first 15 pages or something like that. They could keep you busy forever. And so I like that. It's a challenge for people at any level, especially to do everything that he asks of you. The Kujala and then the Paul Edmund Davies 28-day warm-up.
I've been dying to get that book and get myself back into shape. So.
Some of it can feel a little bit tedious in a way that I think the Kujala doesn't. But it also has some of my favorite exercises, some of my favorite double tongue exercises of all time that I just do every day. When I was working on my doctorate, I studied with Sarah Frizoff. She did her master's at Juilliard with Robert, and he has his own technique and warm-up packet, so I do some of that still and make my students do some of that. Probably the thing that I took away from it the most is just like he does this stuff every day still. Extended range scales up to D, down to B. That's a big part of what I like to do every day now, because it just makes me feel so much more solid after I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then for younger students, I especially like the Flute 101 or that series of books.
Yeah.
So again, but on a different level, of course, it gives you all of the tools that you really need. And you can look at it through so many different lenses at so many different levels. So as you get more confident in just playing some of these things, you can think about the musicianship, which I think is lacking in how most beginners are taught. We don't think about using expressive air from the very beginning, but it's something that they've made a point of including here, even in the very first book. So yeah, I like that a lot, and there are lots of duets in there too.
So as far as like building a studio, you've got a job at a college, so you kind of have some built-in students. But before that, what sort of things were you doing to kind of get yourself out there and get more students? Did you build sort of a social media profile presence or a website? What kind of things did you do to get private students?
The thing that has helped me the most has been connections with other people and other flutists. So while I was in Kansas City, Mary Sheeman, a friend of mine, had been teaching all over and traveling a lot and doing it, and she was getting more students than she could really handle, and didn't really want to do as much traveling, and didn't really need to. So for some of the students that weren't going to travel to her, I picked up, maybe 8 students from her or something like that toward the end of my time in Kansas City. So certainly a reason to be nice to all of the people that you meet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say a common thread with all the teachers I've talked to so far is as important and big as social media and the internet are. Most of them got where they are just by like word of mouth and kind of hustling locally and talking to people they already knew. And in my instance, like I got my first job in the flute business because my teacher sent, a listing to me. And so the social media is great, kids, but it's good to like talk to people in person and like get to know people and your point is right. Be nice and build good relationships with people in your industry.
Yeah, and I'll take it even further and say that a lot of it is just luck and weird happenstance. Yeah, it's been kind of nice and strange how all of these things have worked out over the years. Yeah, and so I think being open to all sorts of things is really valuable too, because you don't know where these opportunities may lead. Some of them are going to be dead ends also, probably.
Yeah. I read that you have been into dance a little. Do you incorporate movement or like eurythmics at all in your teaching?
I think more than anything, body awareness is really important to me and a big part of my teaching. So some of that did come from my dance training, and then some of it has come from body mapping and Alexander technique, just doing bits of each here and there. But it's really important that we learn how not to get in our own ways.
Exactly.
And that's something I think about a lot, because you have to get rid of the excess tension and the extra movement and all that before you can really make all of the other changes that you need to. They're both going to have to happen at the same time, certainly, but it's something I think about in my own playing and in my teaching quite a lot.
Yeah.
We don't do a lot of choreography or anything like that, except maybe occasionally to, feel something a little bit differently.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me how dancers think about music. And maybe that also informs how I think about it now, because a lot of dancers are not good at counting things. And so even if they have some sort of sense of rhythm, it's certainly on a different kind of level. And so they hear connections and transcend what we would think of as bar lines in a way that we're maybe less readily able to do, because they just hear it. They are not used to seeing it on the page and thinking about it in those kinds of concrete terms. And that's also a big thing to me, how we can make long lines and long lines that are full of nuance also. I think that's in part been informed by my dance training.
Absolutely. So for aspiring teachers, what sort of wisdom would you like to put out there for them as they're getting started, or, people who've been doing this forever, maybe they might take something from this as well?
This is certainly easier to do if you have some sort of group lesson setting or a studio. At some point, I think in the spring semester, I just asked them, I said, what's important to me? Like, what have you learned from me this year so far? Because I just want to know. And that was really interesting. They talked a lot about practice strategies, which, yes, is a thing that I'm really interested in. There were certain things that I thought would come up either more or sooner than they did. And it's also just been something that I've thought a lot about. I had a lesson observed, as happens in the academic setting. And the person who observed thought that maybe I was trying to accomplish too many things within a lesson, which I could see as a very, like a young teacher kind of problem. But it's also, we see these students every week for a number of weeks, and they will end up hearing these things over and over again. But by checking in a little bit, I think it helps give that a little bit of focus. Some of the things that maybe they've heard a little bit here and there, 20 times over the year, but maybe not to the depth that they needed for it to really stick. Or maybe it needs to be 25 times in a year for it to really stick. I mean, I'm still learning lessons from my teachers,
right?
Things that make more sense to me because of where I am in my playing and teaching and musical life now. Or just like thinking about, well, how would this person have played this, and trying to figure out how to make that work. So I'm also maybe not as concerned as maybe I should be that everything makes perfect sense right now. It won't all make sense. But I'm hoping that they get the tools that they need to be lifelong learners, how to listen well, how to practice well, the things that I value in music making. And if they get those big ideas, then they can fill in the spaces pretty well on their own, I think.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely be asking my students the next time I see them what they think is important to me and see what they say. But I want to thank you so much for being here, and thanks for doing this. I will link some information below about you, your website. People can sign up for lessons there if they want. But it's great to see you and great to talk to you. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our guests, there's more information below. If you're a teacher, make sure to sign up for Club FCNY to unlock free shipping, extended trials, and commission for teachers, as well as other exclusive benefits for you and your students. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.